Pope Leo XIV election marks a historic moment for Catholic Church, as he becomes the first American and Augustinian pontiff, bringing a wealth of pastoral experience and a commitment to social justice. His leadership is anticipated to bridge tradition and modernity, guiding the Church through contemporary challenges with humility and inclusivity. Pope Leo XIV, Robert Francis Prevost, brings to the papacy a nuanced and deeply pastoral perspective on global issues, shaped by decades of missionary service in Peru, leadership within the Augustinian order, and his role as prefect of the dicastery for bishops. His worldview is grounded in a theology of mercy, justice, and accompaniment, prioritizing the dignity of every human person. 1. Poverty and economic inequality. Pope Leo XIV has consistently shown deep concern for the marginalized. During his time in Peru, he worked closely with impoverished communities and advocated for equitable access to basic services like healthcare, education, and clean water. He sees economic inequality not just as a social challenge, but a moral failure. His vision emphasizes a more just distribution of wealth, structural changes to support sustainable development, the moral responsibility of wealthier nations to support those in need. 2. Climate change and environmental stewardship. In line with Pope Francis Laudato Si, Leo XIV upholds the Church's responsibility to care for our common home. His concern for indigenous communities in Latin America aligns with eco-theological values, advocacy for sustainable living practices, protection of ecosystems in native lands, criticism of extractive industries that exploit the environment at the cost of human dignity. 3. Migration and refugees. Having ministered in contexts where economic and political instability drove mass migration, Leo XIV views migrants and refugees as people in need of protection and love, not suspicion or rejection. He calls for compassionate immigration policies, international solidarity in addressing root causes of migration, dismantling xenophobic and nationalistic rhetoric. 4. Peace and global conflict. The Pope is committed to nonviolence and diplomacy as tools for resolving global tensions. He supports multilateral engagement through organizations like the UN, dialogue between conflicting parties rooted in mutual understanding and forgiveness, a nuclear-free world and disarmament. 5. Human rights and religious freedom. Leo XIV defends the inherent dignity of every human being, including religious minorities under threat around the world, Christians persecuted in Asia, Africa, and the Middle East, gender equity within the Church and society, though he maintains traditional Church teachings on some controversial issues. 6. Technology and ethics. He is cautious yet open-minded about artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and digital surveillance, encouraging innovation with strong ethical boundaries, opposing tech monopolies and exploitation of personal data, promoting digital literacy that includes moral discernment. Pope Leo XIV, Robert Francis Prevost, has articulated clear pastoral priorities rooted in his missionary background, his Augustinian spirituality, and a commitment to a more inclusive, compassionate, and mission-driven church. His vision is one of a church that listens, walks with the marginalized, and embodies Christ's mercy. Below are his main pastoral priorities. 1. A synodal and listening church. Pope Leo XIV strongly supports Pope Francis's vision of synodality, a church that journeys together. He seeks to foster open dialogue at every level, clergy, religious laity, encourage bishops to engage deeply with the realities of their people, ensure women, youth, and marginalized voices are heard in decision-making processes. The Church must not be distant. She must walk with the people, listen to their cries, and respond with the heart of Christ. 2. Pastoral care for the marginalized. A core focus of his pontificate is reaching those on the peripheries, the poor, migrants, indigenous communities, and those excluded from economic systems, LGBTQ plus individuals, divorced and remarried Catholics, and others often alienated by the Church, victims of abuse, with an unwavering commitment to healing and reform. He believes pastoral care should not be based on rigid legalism, but on mercy, accompaniment, and discernment. 3. Vocation and formation. Having led the dicastery for bishops and been prior general of the Augustinians, Pope Leo XIV emphasizes a renewed focus on priestly and religious formation. leaders who are humble, culturally aware, and spiritually mature. Lay vocations as essential to evangelization and community leadership. 4. Evangelization through witness. He promotes a form of evangelization that is incarnational and relational, not through imposition, but through loving witness, calling clergy and laity alike to embody the gospel through action, especially in areas of injustice and suffering, advocating for parish communities to be centers of healing, not mere sacramental service stations. 5. Youth and digital culture. Understanding the church must remain relevant. Pope Leo XIV prioritizes forming young people not only in catechesis, but in discernment and moral responsibility, engaging with digital platforms for evangelization with integrity and presence, supporting World Youth Day and similar movements as catalysts for vocation and faith formation. 6. Unity amid diversity. He is committed to greater inclusion of the global South in church leadership, respecting cultural diversity within Catholic liturgy and practice, promoting peace and ecumenical dialogue with other Christian traditions and interfaith cooperation. 7. Reform of church structures. Continuing the reform agenda of his predecessor, Pope Leo XIV calls for a church that is more transparent and accountable, greater decentralization and subsidiarity, continued efforts to address clericalism and root out corruption. 8. Healing from scandal. He has spoken openly about the need to restore trust following sexual abuse scandals, provide victims with justice and spiritual healing, reform seminary culture to prevent future abuses. 1. Spiritual conversion first. At the heart of Leo XIV's reform is a call to personal and communal conversion. Reform begins not in policy but in the heart of every believer. Clergy, religious, and laity are called to deepen their relationship with Christ. Pride, ambition, and clericalism are seen as major obstacles to authentic reform. A reformed church is not a perfect church. It is a penitent church, walking in humility and truth. 2. Decentralization and subsidiarity. Following the trajectory set by Pope Francis, Leo XIV supports greater authority for local bishops' conferences in pastoral matters, respect for cultural diversity in liturgy and ministry, trust in local churches to address their pastoral challenges rather than imposing uniform global rules. He believes reform must be organic, not micromanaged, and adapted to the lived reality of each region. 3. Empowering the laity. A crucial aspect of his reform is a renewed role of laypeople, particularly women, promoting women in leadership positions within Vatican dicasteries, supporting lay ecclesial movements and ministries, encouraging co-responsibility in parish governance and mission. He envisions a church where every baptized person shares fully in the mission of Christ. 4. Clericalism and priesthood reform. Pope Leo XIV continues to fight against clericalism, calling for a servant model of priesthood, centered on humility and community, healthier seminary formation, with strong emphasis on human development and emotional maturity, greater accountability, including mechanisms for lay oversight in clerical misconduct cases. He stresses that the priest is a shepherd, not a functionary, and must be formed as such. 5. Financial transparency and simplicity. Building trust in church institutions is vital, so he insists on audits and fiscal transparency at all levels of the church, simplification of Vatican structures, eliminating redundancy and inefficiency, encouraging a church of the poor with a more austere and humble style of governance. 6. Tackling abuse and promoting healing. He views the abuse crisis as a deep wound that demands both justice and mercy, strengthening zero-tolerance policies worldwide, supporting victims and survivors through pastoral care and public acknowledgement, ensuring that bishops and religious superiors are held accountable for negligence. There is no reform without justice, and no justice without compassion. 7. Synodality as a reform model. The synodal process is central to Leo XIV's reform strategy. Reform is not decreed but discerned through dialogue and listening, emphasizing collegiality among bishops and consultation of the faithful, making synods a regular and binding part of church governance, not merely advisory. 8. Vatican governance renewal. In the Roman Curia, Leo XIV continues implementation of predicate evangelium, the constitution of the Curia under Francis, streamlines bureaucracy for mission-focused leadership, encourages bishops to serve the church rather than seek promotions. 9. Reforming evangelization. He advocates a return to the evangelical core of the church's identity, shifting from maintenance mode to missionary discipleship, forming parishes as centers of outreach, not just sacramental services, focusing more on witnessing Christ and defending institutional prestige. 10. A long view of reform. Finally, Pope Leo XIV reminds the Church that reform is a slow and ongoing process. Reform takes root over generations, not in one pontificate. He sees himself as a gardener, planting seeds of renewal with patience and prayer. We are not building a new church. We are allowing the Spirit to renew the one Christ founded. 1. Resistance from within the hierarchy. One of the greatest difficulties Pope Leo XIV faces comes from inside the Church's own leadership. Conservative resistance. Some bishops and cardinals are wary of perceived shifts toward decentralization or greater inclusion, fearing doctrinal compromise. Institutional inertia. Long-standing structures and mindsets resist rapid change, especially in the Roman Curia. Fear of ambiguity. Critics argue that open synodality and pastoral flexibility may lead to confusion about Catholic teaching. While Leo XIV calls for reform through listening, some within the hierarchy resist even the premise of shared decision-making. 2. Global polarization in the Church. The Catholic Church today reflects many of the same divisions found in global society. Theological divisions, debates over LGBTQ plus inclusion, women's roles, and remarried Catholics spark passionate disagreement. Cultural divides. What is seen as progressive in the West may be unacceptable in Africa or parts of Asia. Liturgical tension. Conflict between supporters of the traditional Latin Mass and those who embrace the post-Vatican II liturgy complicate unity. Leo XIV must maintain unity while respecting legitimate diversity, a task as delicate as it is vital. 3. Clericalism and abuse legacy. While many reforms have been implemented, the deep wounds of the abuse crisis remain. Some clergy and bishops continue to minimize or deny past failures. Victims in various regions still await justice, transparency, and pastoral outreach. There's a lingering culture of protectionism and secrecy in certain dioceses. Reforming structures is not enough. Leo XIV must rebuild moral credibility from the ground up. 4. Decline in vocations and church attendance. Many parts of the Church, especially in the West, face serious challenges in priestly vocations, with declining numbers and aging clergy, mass attendance, especially among youth and urban populations, religious education, as fewer families raise their children with strong catechesis. Leo XIV recognizes a need for a new evangelization that speaks to modern souls with authenticity and hope. 5. The financial and institutional burden. Reforming the Vatican and global church administration also involves huge financial liabilities due to lawsuits, declining donations, and real estate burdens. Need for transparency in financial dealings, facing resistance from some quarters. Complex property and investment portfolios that sometimes conflict with gospel values. The Pope aims for a church that is poor and for the poor, but institutional weight often drags reform down. 6. Interreligious and ecumenical challenges. In a world plagued by war and division, interreligious tensions, e.g. in the Middle East, India, Africa, make dialogue difficult. Efforts to build bridges with Orthodox, Protestant, and evangelical communities face theological and political roadblocks. The rise of religious nationalism in various countries, e.g. Russia, India, parts of the U.S., complicates the Church's message of universal fraternity. Leo XIV insists that dialogue is a duty, not a luxury, but many reject dialogue in favor of identity politics. 7. Communicating reform clearly. In the digital age, messaging matters and is easily distorted. Some reforms are misunderstood as watering down doctrine. Others are exaggerated by media, both secular and Catholic, for ideological gain. Social media has created echo chambers that polarize and misrepresent papal intentions. Leo XIV must tread carefully between clarity and nuance, avoiding both simplistic slogans and ambiguous gestures. 8. Maintaining unity without uniformity. This may be the most profound challenge. The Church is global, multilingual, and multiculturally diverse. What unites German, Congolese, Brazilian, Filipino, and American Catholics is not cultural conformity, but communion in Christ. Reform must respect subsidiarity, allowing for local expression while maintaining doctrinal fidelity. 9. Time constraints of a papacy. As with any pontificate, time is limited. He may only have 5 to 10 years to enact deep reform. Many changes require long-term cultural shifts that outlive a single pope. Entrenched systems take decades to change. Pope Leo XIV views himself as a steward of the process, not its finisher. He sows seeds for future growth. 10. The burden of expectations. Finally, Leo XIV inherits a church that looks for healing after decades of scandal, longs for clarity in a confusing world, expects answers to deep questions about science, sexuality, identity, and justice. His challenge is to point toward Christ, not merely offer solutions, to call the church to deeper faith and discipleship,